Hello everybody. In this video we're going to talk about socialization. Now, in the last unit we looked at culture and how culture influences the way that we behave, the way that we interact with other people in society, and a lot of the theoretical applications that apply to culture. Socialization is how we learn culture. Socialization is how we learn how to become who we are. Now, you can think about socialization as the entire collection of all the experiences that you have ever had in your life. So this is a process that you have been a part of since actually before you were born, which we'll talk about in a later video. But you are part of this process now, and you will continue to be a part of that process until you are no longer alive. It is constant. It is perpetual. It is non-stop. And when you think about socialization, you think about not just what our preferences are, what kind of music we like, what kind of food we're interested in, what our hopes are, what our goals are. All of that is definitely part of it. But it goes much deeper than that. It goes to what your personality is. The kind of things that you value. Are you a person who tends to like to work? Or are you a person who tends to avoid work? Core components of your personality, who you are, what your sense of humor is, all of those things are brought to you through socialization. So you're probably familiar with a philosophical question known as the nature or nurture debate. The nature or nurture debate has to do with, are we who we are because we are born that way? Or are we who we are because we learn to be that way? For example, if both of my parents were very successful professional comedians, because of that fact, am I predetermined to be a person who is funny? If I grow up in that household with those professional comedian parents, am I likely to be a person with a strong sense of comedy also? What if I was kidnapped out of my crib when I was a young baby and taken from those parents' house to another parent's house? Would I still grow up to be sharp with comedy in the same way that I would if I had grown up in my parents' home? This is the question about nature and nurture. And when it comes to sociology, there is very little debate about it. In sociology, it is determined that nature plays a role in who we are, but it's a small one. And the vast majority about what makes us who we are is coming from our nurturing, otherwise known as socialization. So it's that socialization that is the most important and most consequential component that determines who we are, what we think, how we think, and all of those other things that go along with that. Now, there's a couple places that we can look at for inspiration and evidence to demonstrate why it is that nurture is the more important of these two things. One of these places is when we have the opportunity to study and examine biologically identical twins that grew up in different situations. So it's not common, but it does happen that two twins will be born, biological twins, and they'll grow up in two different environments. That might be due to war, it might be due to family separation, or a couple of other reasons. But one twin grows up in one place with one set of, with one environment around them, and the other twin grows up in another place with a different environment around them. And when you get these two twins together, or you study them independently, you find out that these two twins, although they are biologically identical, have very little in common with one another. In fact, if when you go home tonight or someone knocks on your door tonight and this person is your long lost twin, you never knew this person existed, somehow you were separated at the hospital, all of a sudden here's your biological twin. They've been looking for you your whole life and they finally found you. You will find that although you may look similar to this person, you wouldn't be any more like that person than you would be to me or any other random person, because your socialization has been so different. So these twin studies is one place where we can look to gather evidence for the fact that nurture is the vastly more important component to developing a human being than nature. Another place where we can look is when human beings experience social isolation. Now, there are some examples, and thankfully they are rare, where a child will grow up with none or nearly no socialization. So we've taken nurture out of the equation. And what happens to this child who has not had any nurturing? Now, if it were nature that is the most important component, then this child should be reasonably recognizable as a normal functioning human being because, according to nature, those things are written into its biology. So regardless of the environment around this child, it still has those things written into its biology. What we find, however, is that when a child is denied socialization, they are very much not what we would recognize as a normal functioning human being. This is talked about in your textbook, and this is also talked about in the girl in the window reading, which is assigned for the socialization unit. What happens when nurturing is taken away? And it's pretty heartbreaking results that occur. So with that, we come to the conclusion that nurture is the far more important component than nature. And with this nurturing, again, socialization, the norms and values of our society are carried forward. Again, socialization is how we come to internalize culture. This is how we learn what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. This is how we learn what is something that we should strive for and what is something that we should avoid. This is where we learn what is beautiful and what is ugly. This is where we learn what is desirable and what is undesirable. And this process gets passed on from parent to child and then from child to their children again and again throughout generations. In this way, it also helps to maintain our society because each new generation is socialized by the last. So there is continuation of values, norms, and belief systems from one generation to the other. Now, we said back in culture that culture changes over time, and that's definitely true. So while the next generation will be socialized by the previous generation, that does not mean that the next generation is entirely beholden to those same values and belief systems of the previous generation. In fact, we find that younger generations tend to be more forward-thinking and progressive than their previous generations were. So this video is a short one that gives you just a brief introduction about what socialization is, how we come to the conclusion that in the nature-nurture debate, it is nurture that is the far more important of the two, and what relationship socialization has on culture and vice versa. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video.